Hello friends, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. And today's video is going to be a landscape edit. And I'm going to be walking through a few tips on how I kind of take a landscape from a basic raw file into a finished looking photo, and how I kind of, for lack of a better word, layer in effects, not using layers, but stacking edit upon edit and targeting things in specific areas in order to get the result that I want. So here's the photo I shot recently in Utah, and I'm in Develop Raw. I've already made adjustments, as you can see on the right-hand side. A little bit of contrast, highlights, and shadows work. Tiny bit of adjustment to temperature and tint. So the raw file, the base image, is what you're looking at here. And as I let go of that, you can see it's slightly different. Also did some distortion correction. So went from that to that with Develop Raw. And then I popped into Super Contrast. And let me turn that off. That was just the Develop Raw edit, and with Super Contrast, you can see I did a little bit in each of the three tonal areas because it gives you just so much really great control over the light. And I took the image from that, which was Develop Raw, into that, which is with Super Contrast. So I already did those two before I got started. And now what I want to do is show you how I go in and kind of think and target specific areas with specific things. And so for me, what I want to do is, it was a beautiful sunset, so I want to accentuate the color. I also want to accentuate and effectively control the light in a few different areas. And then I just want to have a little bit of a drama is the wrong word. I want to have an impactful looking final edit. So for me, the first thing I want to do is the river really, I think, draws your eye in, and it curves around to the left toward what's called the Watchman, that mountain there. And so I'm going to go into Develop, I'm going to go into Masking and Mask AI. And what I want to do is accentuate that river. And for me, that's really two things. The first one is light, and the second one is color. So in other words, I want to brighten it, and I also want to make the color pop a little bit more. So there's water. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you're going to see it's going to figure out that mask. And honestly, I mean, it just does such a great job. The only thing is I see a tiny bit of it that I would like to add to. So I'm actually going to reduce the opacity and the size of my brush, shrink that a little bit, and grab a tiny bit more of that up in there just to kind of finish that off. And so there's my mask in place for that. And what I want to do now is basically brighten it. So again, trying to draw attention because it is the line that leads your eye through the photo. So I'm going to brighten that about a 0.4. And then in temperature and tint, I want to create a more of a greenish blue. So for me, that's going to be a negative temperature, which is a negative 22 here. And a negative tint as well. And this might be the only time ever that you see me adding a green on tint to a photo. And that's simply because it works in this situation. But generally speaking, I'm always going to the right with tint, which is more magenta. But for here, it makes sense because I think it brings up some of that natural color. I mean, the water has a little bit of that green to it, but I brightened it and made it a little bit more colorful. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to take Develop again, and in this case, what I want to do is work on the landmass a little bit. So I'm going to go back into Mask AI, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Flora and Mountains and Man-Made Ground and Natural Ground and see what all Mask AI comes up with. And there you go. It came up with, it did okay here. I think scenes like this can be a little confusing. It picked up some of the water. So first, let me clean up the mask so I have exactly what I want, and then I'll show you what I'm doing with this part of the edit. Okay, here's my mask. I've cleaned it up, got it out of the river, and also slightly erased it from the mountaintops because I'm going to do something a little bit different there. But essentially, I've gathered up the landmass in a brush, and what I want to do, or with a brush mask, I should say, and I'm only going to slightly darken it because this is a contrast type maneuver. I'm going to add a little contrast here of about a 14, and then temperature is going to cool off a slight amount, a -5, and the tint is going to go up a +3. So this is really, the tint actually I think kind of works with that because it's a little bit of a warm color already. And I'm basically here just creating a little bit darker foreground, except for the river, of course, because I brightened that. So it's going to be kind of sky brighter, mountaintop brighter, river brighter, and then some contrast on the sides just to kind of shape the light in the photo and make it a little bit more attractive, at least to my eyes. There it is before this develop use, and there it is now. It's a pretty minor thing, but these edits do add up. And in fact, now that I've done that, I'm going to open develop again, go in here with the brush one more time, and I'm going to take a slightly lower opacity. And what I want to do is just paint in a little bit in these trees. These trees, as you can see, where they're a little bit darker, I'm going to play up a little bit more contrast there just to further slightly kind of shape the light and the overall balance of light in the photo. So something about like that. And I'm going to drop this exposure here a slight amount, like a 0.35 or whatever. Again, it's not a massive amount, but there it is before that move, and there it is now. I'm basically just taking the parts in the foreground that are slightly darker than the rest and creating a little bit more darker version of them. Again, this is about contrast because truthfully, the trees, they're kind of green and they were a little bit brighter. The green's a little bit of a darker color, and I just want to use that as kind of a contrasting element. I don't really want you to get too distracted. I want you to kind of, as I said earlier, follow the river through and go to the mountain and have a beautiful sunset, which is what we're getting to right now. So I'm going to go ahead and to develop and mask AI and click sky. And as you'll see, Sky AI, or the sky in Mask AI, it honestly does an incredible job 99% of the time. The only thing that I notice about it, and I've talked about this in other videos, is that it doesn't always get exactly along those edges. And so to adjust that, what I do is I come in with a lower strength brush and I'll just paint along these edges because I want that overlap to be, I don't want a line where there's a definite change between how the sky was masked and that edge before the sky touches whatever's on the horizon. I think that makes sense. In other words, this little white line, I'm just covering that up with a low opacity brush. And I do low opacity because if I do full strength, it'll be a definitive line that'll overlap into kind of the foreground or the horizon line. And I want it to overlap gently, hence the lower strength. And so there's develop, and what I'm going to do here is a slightly warmer, about a 3, and a higher tint. This is where I do like to do tints, which is in my my sunset skies. I'm creating a little bit of color there, and then I'm going to go into saturation. And honestly, I don't usually do a lot of saturation and vibrance in the base use of develop and develop raw, I should say. But in subsequent uses of develop, I may use this in place of other color tools. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing, but you can see what I just did. I just took that sky and I took it from where it wasn't quite as saturated or warm, and I created more warmth in it. And, you know, maybe a little too much, so maybe I'll pull that back just a tiny bit. I do like my colors, but, you know, I also want it to look nice. And I do think it looks nice, but something about like that. There it is before, and there it is now. I think that looks pretty good overall. Okay, now I've got one more move with develop, which is another targeted move. So I'm going to go back into develop with masking and brush, and I've got a lower opacity here and a smaller size, about like that. And all I want to do is come in and paint a little bit right in here. And all I'm going to do is basically lift that exposure just a tiny bit. All I'm doing is accentuating where the sunset is hitting the top of the mountain. So like maybe a 0.4. I don't want to go over the top, but there it is before, and there it is now. And of course my mask is kind of bleeding over the edge, so I recommend that you're careful with it. Let me adjust this size. Let me show that mask, and then I'm going to come in here. Okay, let me get the erase, and I'll just kind of erase a little bit here where it overlapped. What I don't want to do is have my brightening also impact the sky, because you could, especially along those edges, create a little bit of a halo kind of look, and I don't want a halo there. I just want a little bit of brightness on the top of that mountain. So there it is before, a little bit darker as you can see, and of course now it's a little bit brighter. Okay, just a couple of more edits to wrap this up. I'm going to go into masking on structure AI. I'm going to use a linear gradient, and what I want to do is basically just add a little bit of structure to the image, something about like that. And I'm going to pop that about a 18 or 20, let's call it a 19. And let me show you that before and after. It will add a little bit of crunch, and I'll often not do that to smooth water, but this isn't particularly smooth water. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that across the entire scene. And you might want to come in with a brush just to get in here and paint a little bit more of that into the top of the scene where the linear gradient didn't quite make it. So maybe about like that if you want to capture all that landmass, and something about like that. I'm just adding a little bit of structure here. One more time, there it is before, and there it is now. You'll also notice, and I say this quite a bit, Structure AI adds a little bit of brightening to it. So just be careful because it cranks up kind of the appearance of detail, and it also brightens it. So you just want to be careful with that. And then I'm just going to wrap it up with a really couple of simple color moves here. I want to pop the colors a little bit. I mean, it was a beautiful sunset, and honestly, the sunset turned crazy golden a little bit later than this, but I wanted to just bump up the colors a little bit in this one. So I'm just playing with a couple of these color tools because they're really powerful in color harmony. And I'm going to go also into midtones, and this is really minor. But there it is before my edits here in color harmony with 3 different tools. So I recommend, and I say this quite a bit, don't use too many color tools because your color can get over the top. So I'm already a little bit at the risk of using too many because I did some stuff in the water, and then I did some stuff in the sky, and now I'm hitting the entire photo with color harmony. This is not a mask version. This is a full global edit, if you will. But I use 3 different pieces of color harmony, but I use them really small amounts, a 6, a 4, or 1s, that sort of thing. So just be careful. If you use a lot of tools and you use a high number, you can really run the risk of going a little bit crazy with the color. But there it is before color harmony, and there it is now, just a little bit of pop overall. And that's my full edit. Let me show you what we did. That was the base image, unedited raw file, and then with some targeted control of the light and the color and the detail, really, I was able to craft an image that I think looks really good, brighten that foreground leading line, which is the river, added a little bit of color, and then pop some of the light and the color in the sky and control the light in the rest of the foreground in order to create a nice overall contrast look and a final result that I find very visually pleasing. So one more time, before any of these edits and after, and that's how I went about it in this one. I hope these tips give you some ideas, and I'll be back soon with another video working on some specific landscape tips that you can use. And that's it for this one, my friends. So if you enjoyed this video, I definitely recommend you check out that one. That'll give you some additional tips. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And until then, adios.